Great moments are born from great opportunity.
This is rough, hard football.
We got a bunch of proud, valiant warriors.
You are responsible for the outcome of this game.
Fight! That's all I've asked you to do.
I'm gonna come right back at him. Soldier.
Everybody's ready to go. He's ready to go.
It was a male-dominated profession. Women didn't belong.
Hello, everybody.
If a girl fumbled on a word, forget it. She was crucified.
You know, why is a female in here asking me questions about a game that she can't play?
We can lose all those guys to the National Football League.
Hi, everybody. Jody Jackson with you.
It's Philly to slam the Rams. Champ, who you got?
We started the first 11 games.
So the game has been anything but clean.
Titans continue OTAs today.
You know, they say a woman's place is in the home, and I suppose as long as she's in the home, she might as well be in the kitchen.
That may seem like a long time ago, but it's not a very long time ago. The idea was that there was a certain path that a girl was going to follow, and if she was going to work, she was going to be a secretary.
I pushed the button on the Xerox 914.
A teacher.
When you finish reading it, if you have any questions, be sure and come and see me.
Or a nurse.
From the NBC newsroom in New York, President Roosevelt said in a statement today,
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Women are called upon to leave their homes and take jobs.
The participation of women in the labor force has been on a pretty steady incline ever since World War II.
Tens of thousands of women are already at work in aircraft. More are being added as fast as they apply.
The unconditional surrender of Japan.
They never left the labor force after World War II jobs, although they were thrown out of some of the factory jobs that they had. Vietnam made a difference.
This will make it necessary to increase our active fighting forces by raising the monthly draft call from 17,000 over a period of time.
Men were being drafted out of college, so suddenly instead of 5 women in the law school class out of 125, you began to have 50 women out of 125.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
Welcome to the new wave of feminism. Welcome to each other. Welcome home.
Someone told me there's a girl out there with love in her eyes and flowers in her hair.
You know, and then things changed. I mean, at the end of the 60s, of the 1960s, things began to change, and women said, you know, we're not doing this anymore.
1971 dawned mild and clear, a perfect day for football.
Before 1972, there were about 248,000 men playing college sports.
And 63 yards later with Ralph Stefaniak on the save.
And only about 30,000 women.
You know, Title IX was passed in '72 basically as an education bill for women to get equal pay as educators, and it became the calling card for women in sports.
It took years and years and years before our society accepted the fact that physically women could compete and still be a woman.
At recess, I would go pull out a ball out of the ball box and go shoot baskets. I was the only girl doing that.
The feeling when I was in college, when I was in high school, when I was in grade school, was that it wasn't feminine for a woman to get dirty on a softball field or to sweat in a basketball game.
The girls playing basketball or softball and even some like the runners, it just was kind of considered uncool.
There were so many women that opened up so many doors for the women of today that just because it wasn't recognized by the media or socially or TV didn't mean it didn't happen.
The only competition we had was in the form of play days and sports days. The emphasis was never on winning. The emphasis then was always on the socializing, always having tea and cookies afterwards.
But in '75, because my brother David was at UCLA, Coach John Wooden was winning national championships, they came to me in my senior year in high school and offered me a scholarship to go to UCLA. It just honestly started to change a lot. Teams, I think, in schools were starting to, not just basketball, but other schools, whether it be volleyball and track and so forth, to start offering scholarships to young women.
10 years later, the number of women playing doubled.
Women's Basketball Championship.
And today, more than 195,000 call themselves college athletes.
Suddenly, seeing girls in basketball uniforms and on the soccer field changed the way they were viewed by their parents, by their friends, by the boys in their classes. Instead of just sitting there watching from the sidelines, suddenly women were out there participating and excelling.
This is really something. You know, the team played super. Congratulations, 4 years All-American, and now the national championship.
It was a long, slow process. You know, I don't think they ever thought that we would get to where we are now, just as we never thought that would ever happen.
I just think there's a sort of residual impact in broadcasting that if there's such a strong emphasis on being fair on the playing field, then that fairness should translate in the broadcast and print media too.
From the time I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a sports writer. At that time, it was the same as saying, oh, I want to go to Mars. I mean, the job did not exist for women. My mom looked at me and she didn't dissuade me at all or diminish it. She looked me in the eye and she said, sometimes you have to cross when it says don't walk.
It was a male-dominated profession. Women didn't belong because they didn't know sports. At least that was the prevailing thought back then.
You know, why is a female in here asking me questions about a game that she can't play? You know, at my level.
Of course the Boston Globe got calls. A woman covering the Patriots, what are you kidding?
Like Jackie McMullen, who works in Boston, who just has the utmost peer respect. I remember hearing her name a little bit, and Leslie Visser, she was a few years older than me, but not that much. So there weren't a ton of women out there.
On WAGA TV in Atlanta, and she predicts the scores of the football games.
Staying with basketball, here's Jane Chastain.
While the handful of women in the industry at that time did stories like these,
That's what they call a held ball.
they eventually made their way to the big show.
Phyllis, what about the Washington Redskins? They must be the most resilient team in all of pro sports.
I think that's the best way you can put it.
Hello, everybody. We are in the home stretch.
I didn't like to take no for an answer. My mom told me when I left home that I could do anything that I set my head to do. And I really believe that.
Jane, you have been out talking to the Ram quarterback this last week.
That's right, Brent. It's very interesting.
As a matter of fact, Brent, when I did my interview, I was told that immediately after I left, there were 3 other girls still to do their auditions. And Brent got up and he said, you know, he took his mic off. He said, it's Jane or nobody. And so he was the first one that said, she's my choice.
The first women I saw on TV were Phyllis George and Jane Kennedy, and they were both Miss Americas. A lot of criticism about that to the network that hired them, and people would say they don't know anything about football, they don't know anything about sports, but yet obviously in anything, doesn't matter what gender you are, or what race or religion, whatever age, if you focus on something and you do your homework and you are involved in something and just indulge in the homework that you have, you do become an expert at it.
You know, and I made mistakes, but they were human mistakes, and I see guys making the same mistakes, and nobody says anything. Back then, you know, if a girl fumbled on a word, forget it. She was crucified.
Yeah, I think it was difficult for me because, you know, my whole life, if I made a mistake, it was on a really high standard.
In college, I started to notice funny things happening. Like I would be up in a visiting team's press box and someone asked me to go get their stats, or do I know where the coffee is, or those kind of questions. They just made the assumption that I couldn't be there to be a sports writer.
The 1977 World Series.
At the 5th inning, the loudspeaker comes on to the press box. It says, "Melissa Ludke, please report to the main press box immediately." And so up I went, and I got to the back door, and I was met by the assistant to the baseball commissioner, and he announced to me that whatever permission I had gotten from the Dodgers was now being rescinded by order of the commissioner. There would be no clubhouse access for me or for any other woman. And I said, "And why is this decision being made? Can you give me some reason?" And he said, "Well, you know, the wives have not been consulted," to which I said, "On what decision has baseball ever consulted the wives?" And he couldn't answer, but he declared, "There will be no discussion about it. The locker room is closed." So we ended up on December 29th of 1977 filing a court case in the federal courthouse in New York. By lottery, the only woman judge sitting on the federal bench at that time was given the case.
Last week in New York City, a female judge ruled that women reporters could be allowed to enter the New York Yankees locker room and interview the players. The judge said to exclude women reporters from baseball locker rooms would constitute sex discrimination. This ruling is expected to clear the way for female reporters to have access to locker rooms of other teams throughout the major leagues. We take you now to one of those locker rooms.
Now, my male counterparts have always told me that you've been completely open in your interviews.
Well, you know, I like to let it all hang out and be honest with the press.
I must ask you, how did you ever get the name Pee-wee?
It was a shock. That's all. You know, because that's your safe haven. That's where boys can be boys, act silly, you know, walk around, say anything, and just have fun. And now all of a sudden, a female is coming into that space, which, you know, makes you uncomfortable.
And to this day, I can remember it was one of the ugliest things I've ever seen, because the Yankee players did their best to intimidate the women. I'm talking about the way they dressed or didn't dress, the way they paraded around. It was staged to intimidate them. If it happened today, there would be sexual harassment charges.
You know, when a female comes into the locker room, you know, you look right away. And if a female doesn't think it's going to happen, then she needs to move to Mars.
I went into the Cardinals clubhouse. This guy throws a jock at me, and so I thought, what is going on? And then he comes up to me and says, "Are you here to interview somebody, or do you want to just look at a bunch of guys?" Is what he said, sorry.
In 1990, a sports reporter with the Boston Herald named Lisa Olson was sexually harassed by players in the New England Patriots locker room.
It was embarrassing, you know? It was embarrassing to see them treated as second-class citizens, mainly by the athletes.
Following the incident, she was continually harassed by the team's administration and fan base. It got so bad that she decided to quit and move to Australia.
I really think some of those issues were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I don't think there's too many of those anymore.
A lot of female media people showed a willingness to learn the craft that they were involved in. They were professional. They seemed to know what they were talking about. And so I think that won over a lot.
I won a Carnegie Foundation grant my junior year at Boston College, and they placed me at the Boston Globe, which you may or may not know, but I was staggeringly blessed to write for the Boston Globe. The years I was there have since been voted the #1 sports section of all time.
After a 14-year career with the Boston Globe as the first female NFL beat writer, Leslie Visser was offered a chance to do television.
I didn't want the job. I was at the Boston Globe. I had wanted to be a sports writer. I was at the Boston Globe, where every day was a privilege, and Ted Shaker, who then ran CBS Sports, said, "You got to be kidding. There are only 3 networks. There are only 20 of these jobs in the country." And I said to myself, why not flex a whole new set of muscles at the highest level.
A decision that led to her becoming the first and only woman to handle a Super Bowl trophy presentation and to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
So I would like to thank all of you for the pressure and the privilege. The door, yes, it was not open originally, but I was blessed, I guess, to observe that once that door got open, brilliant women came after me, brilliant women followed.
Like Fox Sports Arizona reporter Jody Jackson.
People are looking at you to see, okay, what's this person all about?
Local Nashville anchor and reporter Dawn Davenport.
You're not just a pretty face. You have to come in and you have to know your stuff.
And multimedia reporter for the Oklahoman, Gina Mizell.
Once I decided I wanted to get into this field to be a journalist, it was always sports.
There are now hundreds of women working as television sports reporters.
Hi everybody, Jody Jackson with you.
Hosts,
MVP, and he said UCLA had a great game plan.
And anchors.
See Titans continue OTAs. I've been in the business almost 10 years now, I guess, and I've never had a player or a coach treat me different. I've never had a colleague treat me different, and I've never had anyone from the outside kind of say, oh, you don't belong there.
You're hitting cleanup, so a lot of pressure. Really, once I started professionally, I didn't feel that, and I think that part of it is you have to go in with a certain confidence that you know what you want to do.
Maybe you're treated a little bit differently, but as far as being thought of in a worse way or being mistreated or being disrespected, honestly, everyone that I've ever really covered, whether it's coaches or players, has treated me with respect.
Even though the progress has been huge, there are always exceptions. In 2011, ESPN announcer Ron Franklin was fired after calling his coworker Janine Edwards "sweet baby" during a pregame meeting, which wasn't his first time crossing the line. In 2005, he called Holly Rowe "sweetheart" on air during a college football game.
The NFL is now investigating whether the coach for the New York Jets, Rex Ryan, a member of his staff, other coaches on the team, and many of the players behaved extremely inappropriately toward a female reporter who was working for Mexico's TV Azteca.
Thanks to social media, the incident blew up. It became the most talked about story for days.
She's called herself the hottest sports reporter in Mexico.
And sparked conversation about who was to blame, what's appropriate to wear, and whether women should even be in the locker room.
I'll tell you exactly why I said that women shouldn't be in the locker room, because our locker room is our realm.
Social media has also been a tool for reporters, especially for women, whose names are now no longer just read on the bylines, voices not just heard on the radio.
Well, you will never see the likes of Mariano Rivera again.
Faces not just seen on the screen. They're everywhere, gaining more followers, more support, and an overall greater acceptance. But there are still websites today devoted strictly to female sports journalists, based on how they look, not what they say.
I would ask your friends, what is it that you like about her? And I'm not trying to be cynical. Is it, when it goes to commercials, say, do you know what she was wearing? Or what did she just say? And then go to a game where there was a guy. Did you notice what he was wearing? And do you remember what he said? And I think that is really the important question.
And one female sports journalist must be aware of.
If a woman goes to work as a sports broadcaster and she's dressed to be sexy, they are going to see her as sexy. So she may as well expect to be treated like she looks sexy. And if a guy says to her, you look sexy, it's because she knew it.
I feel like I pride myself on trying to just dress professionally. It doesn't mean to not look nice or look good, but just something that's not going to be, head turning, like, oh my, what is that outfit all about?
Perfect example, going out to training camp, I'm in khaki shorts, a polo, running shoes, or flip-flops, and a lot of times I don't have my makeup on yet and my hair is in a bun, because it's hot out there, you're sweating, you're on a football field. Like, I would never be on the sideline in a skirt and heels because it's just not appropriate.
I think it's come around full cycle. I think women who are good professional journalists actually have an edge.
A lot of times you're surrounded by a lot of men, so they hear me. They hear my question maybe before they would hear the guy next to me.
Do you think you'll be able to play Saturday?
So that's kind of a plus of being a woman in a locker room. you don't ever see more than one woman. You know, if I'm looking to apply for a job and there's already a woman in a sports office somewhere, most likely they're not even going to look at my tape.
If you even look at Phoenix, you know, as far as the local affiliates, not counting myself at a sports regional network, but if you count the local stations, there's really only one woman that has done sports here in the last 10 years, and that's Gail Jansen.
There's probably as many women covering sports on both platforms as men.
This generation is just more receptive of women because these kids have grown up in that environment, and so they look at it as just a part of life.
What was going through your head as your offense drive the field there?
The team dealt with it and is now moving on from it.
Me digas cómo estás, cómo te sientes.
Brian Dawkins will be drained.
I think people do enjoy seeing women on TV talking about sports, and I just think that that's kind of the role that is there right now.
I'm a reporter at heart, and that's what I do. And the sideline role, now it's become, I guess, kind of a diminished psychologically, but there are only 3 people on a broadcast. That's 3 out of 330 million.
A lot of people say to me, well, do you want to do play-by-play? And I say, you know, I don't know, I've never tried it.
They're actively out there looking and need women play-by-play announcers. And the problem is that women haven't really been looked at for that role, really, up to now.
That call reversal at the end of the game, what it is an old-fashioned shootout.
Has pushed tempo as if they were the ones needing a basket.
She still has the double block. She's going high off hands, and she's kind of turning.
Women in the broadcast booth is nothing new. They've called college and professional games across the country for years. Women's games, that is. And rarely do you see women in those same roles for a televised male sport.
Gail, you're now the first woman play-by-play person to do NFL Lives.
Gail Sierens is the only woman who has ever called a televised NFL game.
Touchdown, Kansas City!
In 2000, Pam Ward became the first woman to do play-by-play for a nationally televised college football game.
Marshall, with a huge drive, strikes first.
But after being let go of that position last year, Beth Mowins is the only woman currently doing it.
Smith to the 22-yard line.
Doris Burke is one of the handful of women who has done play-by-play for men's college basketball games.
Lots of standing around by UCLA.
In 1988, Leandra Riley became the first and only woman to do play-by-play of an NBA game. But not one woman has ever called a televised MLB game. However, there are a handful of women who have served as color commentators, like Michelle Smith,
breaking new ground here as part of our broadcast team here in the booth.
Leslie Visser,
the first female analyst ever in an NFL broadcast booth,
and Ann Meyers-Drysdale.
In sports, there is a credibility issue.
Just from a standpoint of if I'm watching the game, because I played it, I want somebody that's going to give me something that I'm not seeing.
If I can put someone at the anchor desk and say, she played soccer for University of X, and I can put that in her network bio, and she can reference that when she's talking about a soccer game, that gives her credibility.
No rating for a game ever went up because of the announcers. Maybe, I think John Madden moved the needle. Other than that, you want to see the Steelers and the Patriots, or you want to see the Arizona Cardinals, or you want to see the Bears against Philadelphia. It really, it's a misnomer, and I'd never seen research.
I never thought that I would be a broadcaster. I mean, that wasn't in my cards. When I tried out for the Indiana Pacers, that was part of my contract, that if I didn't make the team, that I would be a broadcaster. It's a business where a lot of people tell you you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're too old, you don't have the right look, clothes and so forth, you don't speak right.
We haven't seen from the Title IX women get to the point where the audience will accept them as just as credible as the men that they have for generation after generation after generation accepted as the best possible person to be commenting on those sports.
Good afternoon. I'm Diane Sawyer at ABC News headquarters in New York.
Yet we accept them as qualified enough to tell us the news every night, to pass laws in Congress, and to serve our country in the military. But not enough to call certain sporting events.
Oh, he does it again!
I don't see any reason really why a woman couldn't do it. Believe it or not, some people have an issue with voice.
You've got to try and keep your voice down, and a lot of people at home don't want to listen to a high-pitched voice calling a game. And
you look at it from an analyst standpoint. Now, like I said, from play-by-play, no, because the play-by-play describes the action, and that's fine.
And there still is a stigma today that you've got a lot of men at home watching and saying, well, that, woman doesn't, or that, female doesn't know what they're talking about.
Having more women in the booth doesn't necessarily come down to whether they can do it, but whether the future generation of women want to.
A woman is, to me, the strongest species on earth, and I think any time that they decide to do anything, given the fair chance, they'll do it.
Screw them. This is your time. Now go out there and take it.
I've done probably 30,000 of these in the last 40 years, and I wish that it weren't a topic anymore. That would be like my wish in life.
Nobody gets a free ride. No guy gets a free ride, no woman gets a free ride just because they're a minority, just because there are fewer of us.
You just hope that people can see the true thing that matters, which is, can you do the job?
You can try to analyze human behavior, but at the end of the day, it's who is your audience, what do they want to see, keep them glued to the TV, keep the ratings high so that people buy products that are advertised on those shows, because this is a business.
Selfishly, do I wish there were more women? Yes, I do. But it is undeniable that a woman can grow up now saying, I want to cover sports.